podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to our 30-minute extended disc webinar using extended disc work pair assessments to better connect with your team members. My name is Christina and I'm the training director at Extended Disc, and joining me today is my colleague Markku Kauppanen, president of Extended Disc. Welcome.
Hi, Christina. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. We're recording this so you can listen to it again later or share with your colleagues. As always, we love your questions, but because of time, we won't be able to answer them live. So please feel free to type them in the question section and we'll follow up with you after the webinar. Today, we're going to highlight how you as the manager can use the work pair to better connect with individual members of your team. I often, as a trainer, get told by my clients that their own clients, managers, are always looking for more tools to add to their manager's toolbox. So today we'll highlight some of those different sections of the work pair report and hopefully give you some tips on how to get started to use it. So Markku, where is a good place to get us started?
Well, I think when we did a webinar on work pair assessment might have been a month ago or so, and I started getting a lot of questions about, hey, how do I really use it? And it seemed to create a lot of interest. And it occurred to me that when we talk about not only individual assessments, when we're talking about somebody using it sales, leadership, and many other applications, because we can tailor the assessments for specific job roles, industries, and audiences, that kind of I begin to get questions about the work pair assessment from very same angle. They were kind of looking at it, how I can use it with my colleagues. But I think probably one of the most significant and most important ways you can use work pair assessment is from a manager's perspective. How do I become more effective manager by using work pair assessment? And really, ultimately, I think it really simplifies manager's life. I remember when in my career early on in the banking, I know I keep referring to that, but I was really thrown into manager's roles really straight out of school.
Yeah.
And I felt in many ways unprepared dealing with the people aspects of my job. And even after doing extended this for 21 years, I find work pair assessment very valuable tool for me as a manager, because even that I can look at the profile, and as you know, I can talk about a profile for hours and hours. When I look at the tool, it provides me with specific information that I can really use. So I really want to focus on this webinar about how manager can use this valuable tool to make their life easier, make their employees' life better, and ultimately really help elevate performance. And the reality is, like when we talked about the work pair assessment a couple of months ago, is that in the ideal world, everybody gets along. You know, we don't have any friction. We communicate effectively. We share the same vision. We're working toward the same goals. But ultimately, there are some challenges. You know, as a manager, some employees are really easy to deal with. And typically it relates to that our styles are very similar. We see the world the same way, same things motivate us. We can communicate very effectively. But the reality is that most of our employees as a manager are a little bit different from us. So then it creates conflict sometimes, frustration, etc. So really that's where this tool comes and helps with those issues to make that reality a little bit easier.
So let's talk about the work pair tool itself.
Well, I mean, really the tool itself is that it obviously, the way it works is that once the individuals have completed the individual assessment questionnaire, you simply go to a database and you click those two individuals and create the report. And once you have that report, I think when you are a manager and using it, you taking your information, you pairing it up with one of your employees, and you have a very frank conversations about what that results mean. I think it's a really, really great way to create trust and confidence with that employee. When the manager is willing to open up who they are as an individual, these are my strengths, here are my development areas, this is how I tend to communicate. It's one of those conversations that most employees never get to have. And actually, I see sometimes managers when they think about, do I really want to share who I am as a person? And it can be a little bit threatening, but once they do it, it actually makes the employee to look at that manager, that here is a manager who is confident in who they are. They're genuine. They are true leader. They are not telling that they are perfect. They have things that they're trying to develop. And so powerful conversation that you have with your employee. And instead of trying to hide your weaknesses, that sometimes as a manager we want to do, we want to be this all-knowing, all-powerful, we have all the answers. It's a very human way of really relating to your employee, and it's a very powerful type of conversation to create that trust and confidence. And once you have that, the employee and manager will have a much better relationship.
That was so beautifully said, Marku. I love what you just said. I think sometimes as managers, we just kind of start to, I think, cruise in our managerial role. We just think this is just how it does. And we forget the human aspect, which is kind of what you're bringing into it.
Well, as a manager, sometimes we want to make sure that, and I think it's a mistaken view to say that, hey, if I want to be effective, I need to be seen like I don't have any weaknesses. I know everything. I have all the answers. But the reality is that managers don't have all the answers. And when the employees begin to see their manager as a human being, and certainly they have skills and things like that that make them there's a reason they're a manager. But once they are able to share that, it's a very powerful conversation, as I said. And by the way, what I've noticed that for the managers, higher you are in the organization, a little bit more challenging that becomes, because but it becomes even more powerful when you look at effective leaders in different kind of organizations and or government agencies and leaders around the world. I believe the most effective leaders are very comfortable in their own skin. They're very genuine beings, human beings. And that kind of a confidence is really a foundation for being an effective leader. And part of that, being that confident, is be willing to share who you are and not trying to be something you are really not.
Yeah, and not only just willing to share, but willing to make adjustments and know your own development areas and to try to develop them.
And I talked with some managers when they hear about this for the first time. It's a really kind of a scary proposition, but they always tell me that once they start doing it, it has a significant impact, not only what kind of relationship they have with the employees, but ultimately how their employees and the manager are performing together. It's just they're always more successful.
I agree.
And of course, one thing about making this a little bit less threatening is that the work pair assessment provides a very well-defined setting in which to discuss how we are similar, how we are different. And probably most importantly, there's nothing that is judgmental. There's no good or bad. There's simply different types of preferences of how we do things, how we communicate, how we interact with our environment. And when you do that, you really create that awareness of how we are different. How do we see the world? And once we have that awareness and we are discussing it in a well-defined setting of the DISC model, we can really begin to understand each other and ultimately appreciate what we bring to the table, how we can work together more effectively and become more productive.
Yeah, I think that appreciation, sometimes we don't have the opportunity to appreciate and value people's strengths and their differences. So that's another approach the work pair can provide.
I was going to say that, one of the things is that, like, I'm not being guilty of this, is that when we find a new employee, we're so excited to find somebody that we know is going to be a great contributor to our team. Then they start working, but then we kind of get into our cruise control. We start getting involved in our daily task, and we don't take the time to really properly onboard that new employee. And the work pair assessment really is a great tool in onboarding to really understand how we are, again, different, similar, etc. And it creates that connection between the manager and the new employee very, very quickly.
Exactly. So let us, as we promised you, give you just kind of highlights from the reports. Now, what's great about the work pair report, just as with any of our reports, is that they're customizable. So we all have our favorite sections. I'm just going to highlight a few, but just know that you can always tailor the work pair report, just as with any of the other individual and team reports, to match what you need from it. So I always find a good place to start is with the extended DISC profile. So what you're seeing here is a visual representation of the pair's behavioral styles side by side. And in this example, you can see that Sarah Sample, in her natural style, she is a dominant I. She is most comfortable in the I style behaviors. on the other hand, and we'll say that Sarah is our manager and her direct report is Stephen. And Stephen's profile too, on the bottom right side, Stephen is a dominant D. And another observation that hopefully you might be able to make is that Sarah's least comfortable style happens to be the D style, where Stephen's style is the most comfortable. So this is a pair that they're going to have similarities and they're going to have differences. And unfortunately, we won't have time to kind of train you on how to read these profiles. But luckily, we've done a webinar on it, and you can go check that out. So with the strengths, another section, you can see here that Sarah's strengths is she puts people in a good mood. She's obviously very people-oriented. And Stephen, being a D style, one of his strengths is he keeps the troops in shape. He's much more task-oriented. Anything you would add about strengths, Marku?
Well, strengths is obviously we love strengths because those, they make the contribution to the team and the organization. But one of the things we often do, not only as managers but as employees as well, that we tend to overlook our strengths. So we don't want to take it for granted. At the same time, we need to be careful that we don't overuse our strengths, and that's especially true when we begin to feel pressure. Because when we feel the pressure, we feel stress, we really revert to our natural style. So instead of positively using our strengths, we begin to overuse them. And overused strength, as we have discussed many times, really becomes a weakness. So that's something to look for. And as a manager, when you begin to see your employee overusing their strengths, that's a good signal, sometimes a red flag for you that this person is feeling pressure. Do I need to do something to make that go away and find what is really the cause of this pressure feeling? Because obviously it's not a good place for anybody to be.
Exactly. So now that you have an understanding of your style and your direct report style, what's great about the report again is that there are questions that help prompt further discussion and development. So you can talk about your each of your styles, what you are most comfortable with. Maybe look at similarities and within your styles. How does that affect your working relationship? And as Marku was mentioning, when we overuse our strengths, that can get us into trouble. But when we have two individuals that your style and their style may be similar, that's another way to amplify our strengths to a point where they can become weaknesses.
Yeah, whenever we talk about not only with pair settings, but team settings, when we have similar styles, two things will always happen. One is we amplify those strengths that we're talking about right now, but we will also amplify our weaknesses because we begin to ignore those behaviors. So for example, if we are two C styles, and a C style manager, C style employee, we really begin to focus and actually kind of feed off of that C style behavioral energy. But we tend to avoid some of the other behavioral styles because neither one of us really want to get out of our comfort zone unless we have to. So that's something to really watch out when you have an employee that is very similar to your style. Make sure you don't gonna get stuck in your comfort area.
Exactly. So these questions, as well as questions in other parts of the report, are really designed to help you start a conversation and also ultimately to give a clearer picture of who we are, who the other person is, instead of sometimes we rely on our own preconceived views, which can get us into trouble. And they're not always correct about that person. So another section here that I'll highlight is the communication styles. How do you both prefer to give and receive information? So our communication styles can come across differently to different people, and hopefully understanding that will help you make the adjustments you need to make. Sarah here, you see, it shows that she's easy to approach. She's good at advising. She's good at teaching. Again, she's a very people-oriented style. But on the other hand, when you look at Stephen, he tends to be probably more outspoken, his way or the highway, more unyielding. So what do you do with that as a manager? So Sarah, she might need to make the adjustments, because what Marku and I always will tell you is that unfortunately we cannot make Stephen adjust to us. We are in control of our own behaviors. So Sarah, as a manager, maybe she needs to focus more on tasks, maybe give some options to Stephen so he feels heard, and he feels he has some type of control in the interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at employee and their managed relationship, ultimately any kind of challenges and problems ultimately come down to communication challenges. We are just not understanding what the manager is saying, or manager gets frustrated because it seems that the employee is not getting what they're trying to communicate. So like here we have two employees. When the employee, Stephen, is one who really likes pretty direct communication. For Sarah, who is a low D, actually direct communication can be threatening because they may perceive that if I'm direct, I'm being rude, I'm not being considerate. So here, Sarah is really having to take control of her behavioral style and modifying her communication style to be more direct, and actually realizing that when I do that, I'm speaking the language of Stephen. Stephen will understand more clearly what I'm saying rather than trying to make it more about people. Stephen is all about tasks.
Exactly. So just in summary of what Marku and I just talked about is your message and communication style comes across differently to different people. We need to recognize that. You can't change who you are, but you can make adjustments. In fact, we're not asking anyone to change who they are. You are who you are. But if you can make these sometimes brief and temporary adjustments, then you're more likely, as Sarah, the manager, you're going to be more likely to engage Stephen, and he's going to be interested in what you have to say, and hopefully you'll walk away much more successful.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is that this is something I hear just about every day from my clients. When we look at work pair assessment or individual assessment, as you know, Christina, our reports are very, very unique to each individual. In fact, we have over 220 million unique individual reports. And some of that text will obviously kind of roll over to the work pair assessment. And this is the comment I hear all the time, that there was this one statement about my employee that just made everything so clear. Even if you look at the profile, like we looked at Sarah's and Stephen profiles, and even if you're an expert in interpreting profiles, because the reports are so unique that typically there's statements in the report that really opens it up. And they're like, now I know how to deal more effectively with this employee, or now I know what do I need to do differently to motivate this person. So those specific statements and the questions that are in the report really often open it for the manager and ultimately the employee as well.
Yeah, and as Marku mentioned, with motivators, that is one section in the work pair that you can have or you can focus on as well. We're not going to talk about it today, but with any of those sections in the report, what we say is you don't have to focus on every item within that section. You know, as Marku said, some statements will resonate more with you. Maybe there's motivators that you yourself self-identify with, and then that way you can show it to your manager, or for the manager, you can show it to your direct report. But as you go through the report, just think about that. Think about things that stand out. I always say, put a little asterisk next to the ones that really stand out to you. Maybe put a question mark next to the ones you're not quite sure of about yourself or about the other person. Again, it's an impetus. It gives you the opportunity to have these discussions. Okay, so some of our work pair reports have behavioral competences in them, and many of you that use our individual assessment are familiar with them. So here, what happens is you can see that there is a behavior, and it shows where Sarah and Stephen fall in the spectrum of that behavior. So are they comfortable with that behavior? If they are, they're going to fall more to the right of the spectrum. If they're not as comfortable with that behavior, meaning it's going to just simply take more energy for them, they're going to fall to the left. And you can see here, the example I have is that when it comes to preferring to talk instead of listening, you have your D and your I style. It's very comfortable for them. They do prefer to talk instead of listening. And the awareness is that who's listening if both are preferring to talk. So again, if you're comfortable, you're natural, and you're both falling on the right half of the spectrum, the natural side, you may be aware that you might be overusing that style.
Yeah, it's a great point. I would like to look at this part of the report and really quickly find out where we're similar, where we're different. We want to make sure we don't overdo things,
right,
but also ignore some behaviors, because neither one of us are comfortable with that. And of course, where are the great opportunities to complement one another? That's where I really find great opportunities to work more effectively. In my case, with my employees, when I understand how they're different, this is really where my opportunity is to really make sure that they make the greatest contribution to the team as over here at Extended Desk.
And as Marku was mentioning, when you fall to the left side of the spectrum, where both of you fall on the not natural side, then things may fall by the wayside because neither of you might be a thoughtful, fact-based communicator when it comes to having to present in that fashion. It might be something that neither of you are comfortable with or aware that you need to do. So it's, again, the awareness piece. And then what Marku was also talking about is the complementary, the gaps. Here you have Sarah, who's very or is not as comfortable with direct goal focused communication, but Stephen is very comfortable with it.
The great example is exactly what I was mentioning there. That's what I really look for. Of course, we need to put in the context of what we need to accomplish together. If it's something, let's say we are neither one of us really strong with certain behaviors, it may not be relevant to our present situation, and therefore I'm not going to be concerned about it. We have over 2,000 of these areas from which we can select, so you can easily make sure you get reports that are relevant for you at this time.
And even to take it one step further, you can prioritize these behavioral competencies into what is relevant and critical for your success as working together at this point in time. So just remember, if you use the behavioral competences, you don't have to focus on every one, just prioritize, and just know that it can help you identify areas that you as a pair can focus on, and then take that next step. Create a plan of action for addressing the ones that have the most potential to create challenges and also the most potential to make you successful. So here you see, again, the more natural for that individual in the work pair, the more willing the person is going to accept responsibility. Whereas the less natural, the more energy is required for that individual to work that over long periods of time. So just remember, when you're thinking about delegating and sharing responsibilities, this is one way to look at it.
Yeah, it all comes down to, as a manager, we can only control our behavior. Again, goes back to that 4 steps, understanding how, what the model is, who the other person is, who I am as a confident manager, and then modify my behavior in order to be a most effective leader, mentor, coach for that employee.
Exactly. The last section we want to highlight, and again, there are more sections that we are able to cover today, is the question section. So these questions are based on each person's natural behavioral style as well as their current role. So when I always talk about clients, when they use these questions, again, pick and choose, but they sometimes feel it's challenging to answer, but they also know or feel that it helped to identify some blind spots and areas that they needed for further development. So these questions are really designed to help you through really, again, generating that productive conversation, because we know that conversations are going to build stronger relationships. Anything you want to add about the questions, Marku?
Well, what I would say is kind of reiterate what I mentioned earlier about specific statements. And in fact, what I did when we prepared for this webinar briefly yesterday is I said, I need to pull the work pair assessment to our newest employee who started here about 2 months ago. And almost kind of ashamed to say there's some statements in there that I really have to stop and think, and I have to reflect on in my morning run. For example, it says here that you say directly what you think. This is a question for me. You say directly what you think. Have you ever asked what other people think? And I had to kind of stop and say, I don't think I've really spent enough time asking questions of our new employee, and probably you as well. And I'm so task-oriented individual that sometimes I forget to really solicit feedback from others. So it was a good reminder for me, and I'll have to put this statement on my desk to make sure that I, not only with this particular new employee, but others, that I ask what they're really thinking.
So you're basically telling me I'm going to get a lot of questions today. No, Marku is actually very good at adjusting. He's a great boss.
Well, but it's a good to get these reminders. And like I said, this was a little bit of a wake up call for me that sometimes I just don't do it. And even that I look at the profiles, I know my profile really well. I know the new employee's profile extremely well as also. but that's one thing I really haven't practiced enough. And I'm making very publicly making a commitment here that I will do a better job.
My boss is putting himself out there. Love it. All right. So, we talk about, using the work pair. Hopefully we've given you some practical steps to get started, but what are the possibilities? Sometimes we just kind of use one report one way. We talked about that before. We just kind of get stuck in it. But the ability to use the work pair in so many different aspects of our organization, we often learn about it from our own clients. They tell us how they use the work pair. So we wanted just to give you a couple opportunities or suggestions of where our clients tend to use the work pair.
It's a very pragmatic report because just the example that I share from my work pair assessment with an employee is that it gives you very specific things to talk about and think about and reflect on, and really provides you clear guidance what you may need to do differently. So with current employees, it's something that it's good to review from actually fairly regularly. I would say if you're a manager, you may want to look at your work pair assessment at least monthly basis for all of the employees, if unless you have hundreds of them. If you have 10, 15 employees, look at it monthly because you find something new all the time or be reminded of something very important. New hires, extremely important to use there. I think the onboarding is something, this is not an original thought to me, but onboarding is something that people overlook, managers overlook. We're happy to have a new employee, and then we go about our normal routines and overlook how important it is to get that new employee to a great start. And again, it's a great way to build that trust and confidence in the new employee when the manager has a conversation about how we are different as individuals and what kind of a game plan we're going to put together so we can work as effectively as possible going forward.
And then other people talk about proactive pairings, like thinking about if you want to put two employees together, whether they're working in special assignments, or one thing Marku had mentioned, mentoring is a great way. If you're thinking about matching up a mentor with maybe a high potential, whether they're similar or different, it still gives them more insight into how their dynamics are going to be. So again, very proactive. You can use the work pair as well.
Yeah, and as a manager, most managers, they begin to see those signs that some employees may not be getting along as well as they could. They begin to notice those conversations, that there's some friction. It's a very effective, very practical, and very
non-judgmental
and very time-efficient way to really get to the root, to the cause of those potential challenges and dealing with them before they become bigger problems.
Absolutely. But then we do have the conflict resolution work pair if you need it. But hopefully, as Marku said, we hopefully don't get there. So just next steps, just kind of takeaways that hopefully both not only you, the manager, but your employees will understand from it. We own our own behaviors, so we can choose or we can choose not to modify our behaviors, but it's, we're accountable. What we can't do is force others to modify their styles. And the work pair, as well as DISC itself, helps us to understand what drives people. And then for us personally, it helps us to recognize our options for dealing with them. So you can then choose to interact with people the way they prefer to. I always say when you do that, they're going to be more likely to be engaged. They're going to be interested in what you have to say. And ultimately, you're going to get what you want in the end.
That's right. And if you're a manager or if you are any employee and you have access to extended DISC, give it a try one time, and I promise you will use it again. And the reason you will use it, two reasons. One is it is pragmatic. It will save you time. It will make your life easier. Also, if you're using extended DISC already, it doesn't cost you anything additional. As you know, a work pair assessment, team assessments, it doesn't cost you any additional. It's a tool for you to use. And I promise you, once you use it a couple of times, probably even once, you will begin to make it a regular part of your managerial role to use this tool to make your life easier, make your employees more motivated and engaged, and make your team more productive.
And just as importantly, you're not asking your employee to take any additional assessment. So thank you, Marku, for joining me today. We have another webinar coming up called the Sales Competence Assessment, How to Create a Roadmap to Success. And that'll be coming up next Wednesday, October 17th at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time.
Yeah, and go to our website. Address is there. Click on the events. It's on the top toolbar. You'll see all of our future webinars there. Also, if you want to listen to our past webinars, you can find the recordings. Just go to I think it's the bottom toolbar. You just click on extended disc webinars and you can listen to the past ones, and hopefully you find them helpful.
All right. Thank you, everyone.